Hi, my name is Shreya, and welcome to my podcast, All About Her, where a confused high schooler, aka me, interviews influential women to learn about their experiences and advice for girls like me. Today, I'll be speaking to a woman who is a social and behavioral scientist. She works primarily with finding ways to use social and behavioral sciences to change international development, including voter turnout all the way to COVID infection rates. Today, we delve into the biases within the scientific community and how to get past all of these challenges. So please welcome Dr. Laura Van Berkel, and let's jump right into episode number 10. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Berkel. Can you just quickly introduce what your current career is and what you specialize in?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Shreya. So my current career is I serve as a social and behavioral change advisor through a fellowship program, the AAAS, or American Association for the Advancement of Science and Technology Policy Fellowship Program. It's all very long names. And I work at U.S. Agency for International Development and our Center for Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance. And their names are so long, I've already forgotten the second part of your question. I'm sorry, can you please repeat it? You asked what my current career is.
And what you kind of specialize in.
Okay, what I specialize in, yeah. So my my background is in social psychology and political psychology. And what I do at USAID is I advise on how to use social and behavioral sciences to change human behavior, or to use human behavior to solve some important challenges in international development. So some of the problems that we work on are how to get people to turn out to vote, how to work on behaviors and gender-based violence, how to get people to wear masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19, things like that. So really a huge variety of behaviors.
And I'm assuming that, because like you said, it's a very specific kind of job title. I'm assuming that like growing up, you didn't really think you would be here in this specific spot. So what were some of your dream jobs kind of growing up? What did you think you would be doing?
Yeah, it's definitely true that I did not expect to have this position. I didn't know such a position really existed until a year or two ago. So it's definitely something that evolves and changes over time. My dream job growing up, I went through a few different phases. I can't remember what it was when I was younger, but I know in high school I had a time where I wanted to be a photojournalist, and that was my dream for a while. And after that, I know I was interested in psychology, but thought more about doing like therapy or psychiatry. And in college, it changed to focus more on social psychology. So definitely still changing.
And how throughout high school, like you said, you were kind of going through phases and stuff like that. I totally see that with me and my friends going through a bunch of different phases. But how did you kind of, I guess, hone in on psychology in general, social science, and kind of did your high school experience contribute to that, or did it kind of send you off?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some of my interest stems from really having role models that I looked up to. So my mom, I know, was a psychology major, and so it was something that, because she majored in that, was something that I always thought about. And I was very lucky, too, that in high school we had a psychology AP course offered. And so I was able to take psychology in high school and see that it was something that really interested me and that I liked. And yeah, the interest kind of, continued to evolve. I really didn't know about social psychology very much until I went into college and worked at a research lab and had to take classes as part of my major. But I've always been interested in people watching, and have also always been, pretty interested in politics too. And so when I found out I could merge the two things, it was really like an aha moment of realizing such research in a field existed.
Out of curiosity, did the teachers that you had in psychology and stuff, were they female, or did you like share some type of relationship with them that kind of motivated you to push for this field or something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So my high school teacher was a female teacher, and so that also kind of helped with that role model role of seeing, a woman in the field. Um, but it is true. I think all my teachers were mostly women, except for in the science fields. All my teachers were men in high school, so it did help to see this particular science was led by a female teacher. Um, but I don't know that we had any particular relationship. She was very involved with students and had like study groups for the AP exam for people that wanted it. And so she did kind of go above and beyond the classroom. I remember we met in a Barnes and Noble, I think, for a few evenings in preparation for that test. And so she was really great in that way of making sure that we were really well prepared and prepared for college and things like that. And in college, I had a variety of mentors. Some were male and some were female in psychology. But psychology is a unique science in that way because I think there are a lot more women in psychology than there are in other science fields. But you see that as you get kind of more senior, it does taper off. So there are a lot more women that are undergraduates by far, and then there are a little bit less as graduate students and a little bit less as professors.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does kind of taper off over seniority, unfortunately.
So kind of on this topic of like how you found your passion in psychology, how, like, do you think there was any defining moment where you kind of realized like this is what I wanted to do? And I know that from the different women that I've spoken to, like their opinions are still kind of changing and they still don't know like for sure where they're going to be in a few years.
Yeah.
But just kind of right now at this point of your life, do you think there was a defining moment?
Yeah, I can't think of a particular single moment, to be honest. I think, yeah, it just kind of evolves over time, and I meandered a little bit. Like, even as I studied psychology, what exactly I wanted to do with that is something that's changed over time. So in graduate school, I wanted to be a professor at a university or college, and came to realize that maybe it was something that I thought I wanted but didn't actually want, and the job market was tough, and I applied for this policy fellowship, and an aha moment came when doing this interview for USAID, and I clicked with the people that I was talking with, and they asked me if I had anything that I really cared about, and I said, well, I really care about women's political participation. And they said, oh, we work on that. And it was really like, oh, okay, I can do something that like, I'm really excited about, and there's a job for it. So that was kind of an aha moment itself, but it's not something that I necessarily had realized that I could work in this field, and kind of got lucky in stumbling into it.
That's like another theme that I've been noticing is that a lot of the women say that they kind of found their like niche where a bunch of other people like them like to study these things, and they were like, oh wow, this is really interesting. So I think that's really cool that that's kind of been a common theme throughout all these interviews.
yeah it definitely is more open career path than I even realized a few years ago, so it's kind of good in that way.
So kind of on the same path to like how you got to your career today, what are some struggles that you faced prior to your career, and how do they compare to struggles that you still face in your career today?
Yeah. So I think as I've kind of hinted at, it's always a challenge to identify exactly what you want to do. And it's something I think that I still struggle with, is whether I'm choosing the right path. And something I'm even coming to realize now is there is no right path, and you can change paths and go back, and it's okay to try things out. And if you don't like it, then you can try something else, and you can keep shifting your interest in what you want to do. And that it's kind of a myth that you figure out what you want to do when you grow up and you do that. Like, a lot of people even older than me are still figuring it out. So that's a struggle that I still continue to grapple with. And I think that another, as I hinted to earlier too, a big challenge is still gender discrimination, unfortunately, and facing those kinds of challenges. And as I said, psychology is more female dominated than a lot of other science fields, but there's still a long way to go, unfortunately. So there's been papers published showing that women are less likely to be authors of psychology journal articles, and less likely to be cited, less likely to get awards, less likely to be hired as professors and be promoted. And so that's something that we still face, but I think are making progress in. And the really good thing about social psychology is that we study things like gender discrimination. And so when you feel frustrated with, people aren't really listening to my ideas, but they're listening to this guy's ideas that he just repeated what I said, that kind of stuff. What we do is we run a study and we prove that we're facing discrimination and systematic bias. And so you can kind of challenge your frustrations in that way in psychology and show that what you're experiencing is real and is happening in a lot of ways. So it's kind of a good outlet, I guess, in that way.
Yeah, this definitely seems like a way to, kind of hit back at the at all of this kind of stereotyping and all that sort of discrimination that happens. Just kind of a question that I just thought of. How do you think we can kind of fight back against all the sort of stuff that's happening with gender equality and everything like that? Because, especially as a high schooler, I feel like it's really internalized. We don't really see it in a very visual way, but you feel it kind of in everything that you do.
Yeah, it is one of those challenging problems because sometimes, it's these little things and you don't realize how much they stack up to really impact you. There was, I took a psychology of oppression class in graduate school, and one of the readings we did that I think the author is Marilyn Frye, but I'm not sure if I'm getting that name right, but it was something that really stuck with me is they describe, she wrote an essay that describes oppression as like a bird cage, that if you just look at a single wire, the bird can fly around it, right? But it's all the wires put together that really, really cage you in. And I think that's just such a good metaphor and way of thinking about it. But that's a little bit of a sidetrack. But something that we can do about it is it's a tough problem to solve, even among psychologists who study these issues. We're still grappling with it. I think that some of the more successful programs are things like mentorship. So pairing women that are successful in the field with younger women to show, if you see it, you can be it, right? That it is possible to have a career in that area. I think, we do have to just continue to call things out as we see them and point out when people may be acting in biased ways. And I think that we also have to build systems to really help us overcome our biases. So doing things like blind interviews potentially when possible, where you may not know the gender of the applicant. Of course, that's mixed because sometimes it's helpful to know gender, so you understand that people face, that women might face more challenges than men, and so getting the same level of accomplishments actually takes more effort for women than for men. So it is tricky in that way. But there is also a really good book by a woman named Iris Bonet that's called What Works? Gender Equality by Design. And so they offer she offers a lot of solutions in her book for how we can kind of design our workplaces to help us overcome these biases. So I'd recommend that.
I know you kind of touched on a few different things that kind of stuck with you, when you read this study, like you said, about gender equality and things like that, the book. But kind of just in general throughout your life, what do you think has been a very impactful moment of learning for you where you just really took something away? It doesn't necessarily have to be about gender equality or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think for me, a lot of the moments of learning are at the time moments of failure. So it's things like I really bombed a chemistry class my freshman year of college, really never got such a bad grade on a class in my entire life. Totally bombed it. And, it was really hard at the time, but it really taught me that I needed to be a little more systematic in my studying, that I couldn't study for college in the same way that I was studying for high school. So it really helped me get my act together in that way. And then the same thing with, as a psychologist, every time a paper is rejected, you kind of learn a little bit more about how the process works and how you need to frame it. And, even things like getting rejected from jobs really helps you learn about what is or is not right for you and find new paths. So it's always challenging at the time, but I don't know if I could identify one single moment, but I think just a lot of those moments where it's failure at the time is really something that I've always learned from.
I'm kind of seeing that now, in high school itself, when I don't do as well on a test or something like that, my I procrastinate on an assignment, or like I'm just not timing out things very well. And I think back to like a year ago when I was making like some mistakes like this, and how I've kind of learned from that, and how, you know, it's not defined in the moment, like what's actually going to happen or anything. So just kind of learning from that is really important, I think. Last kind of closing question, do you have, or not really question, but do you have like any advice for other girls who want to pursue this field, or anyone in general that wants to kind of go into STEM or some STEM related field?
Yeah, so I think my biggest piece of advice is don't wait to be invited for opportunities. I think that that's something that I personally have a tendency to do, is just kind of do really well and hope you get noticed, and it's not always how it works. So I would encourage girls that are interested in this field and in STEM in general to reach out and make your own opportunities. So do things like ask if you can be a research assistant for a lab. That sometimes you'll get requested by professors, but sometimes not. But if you ask, they're always happy to have more help, right? And even as a high schooler, some labs will allow you to work, you know, at a university or college with the professor and with graduate students and with college students. And it'll, you know, help you potentially get a leg up, but also help you decide if it's something you really like or not, if you like working in that science. And also just asking how you can be involved or for resources. I think, an aha moment for me in graduate school is I had a friend who he's a male graduate student in psychology at another university. And he asked, like, can we do like a talk exchange where I'll give a talk at your university, your brown bag research meeting, and you give a talk at mine? And to me, it was something that, like, I didn't think that we could do that. I thought, you know, the professors invited people and you couldn't really have a say in it. But we asked our respective heads of department and they were fine with it. And so it was really like, oh, you can just ask, and people are more than happy to give you the opportunities you want. You just have to ask, you know. So that was I guess, an impactful moment of learning as well. That you can create your own opportunities.
That's something that I've learned, obviously, by like reaching out for this podcast, kind of getting to know a lot of different people. It's like something that it's really important, like in the real world, and especially just building up to getting a career in the real world. It's like you just have to be confident in what you're doing and know that you're not doing anything wrong by asking for help or asking about something in specific. So yeah, that's a really great point.
Yeah. And I'm really impressed at how, you know, you've been reaching out to people for this podcast. And that's, I think, definitely what I would recommend is just having like these types of informational interviews, because even as a professional, I continue to have interviews with people that are more senior than me to figure out what I want to do with my life. So it really doesn't end once you pick your major in college or anything like that. It's something that you should continue to do.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Berkel. I really appreciate all your advice, all of your answering of my questions. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. It was super fascinating to learn about various issues within science and, moreover, Dr. Berkel's advice on how to overcome them. Don't forget to subscribe down below, check out Dr. Berkel's LinkedIn, and follow me on Instagram for more updates about the show. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay strong, and stay snazzy. Happy Holy!